Alan Lund Company looks forward to seeing you at Matt's in March.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
The battle over tariffs between the U.S. and Canada, Mexico, and China has become hard to keep up with changes sometimes happening in hours rather than days or weeks. I'll discuss that and some of the president's latest nominees for trucking-related positions with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. The most recent trends report for trucking cybersecurity has been released. We hear from Ben Wilkins, cybersecurity principal engineer with the National Motor Freight Traffic Association, about how things are going and for some tips to keep yourself and your company safe. And finally, an effort in Mississippi would trim and gradually eliminate the state's income tax, but at the same time, significantly increase funding for transportation. Scott Thompson will cover that and more with our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association has issued a call to action to its roughly 150,000 members about a new bill in Congress that takes aim at freight fraud, something that's estimated to cost the trucking industry $800 million each year. The Household Goods Shipping Consumer Protection Act would restore FMCSA's authority to issue civil penalties against bad actors, essentially giving the agency teeth to fight back. Although the name is a bit misleading, Bryce Mungen, OIDA Director of Legislative Affairs, said the bill is an important step in addressing the growing problem of freight fraud.
There's, a lot of kind of technical legal back and forth, but the bottom line is FMCSA was found through a court case to not have the authority to issue penalties. And so what this legislation would do is reinstate that authority and make clear that they have the authority to do this. So for anyone who's looking at this or kind of sees this, don't be concerned or alarmed that we're supporting a bill that's giving more authority or anything like that to FMCSA. This is very simply giving FMCSA the authority that we believe they should have had all along to go after these bad actors.
The legislation would also require brokers, freight forwarders, and carriers to provide a valid business address to FMCSA before acquiring operating authority.
This is something that carriers have had to do when registering, and by extending this requirement to those other people in the freight industry, it should help to crack down on some of these people who are using bogus addresses, P.O. boxes, and things like that. So, again, these aren't, it may not seem like it's setting the world on fire here, but it's a really important first step to just get at those people and make it more difficult to, get into the industry, to perpetrate this fraud in the first place, and then on the back end to finally levy some penalties on people when they're found to have done so.
The bill has been introduced in both chambers of Congress, and it's bipartisan in both.
This isn't the silver bullet that's going to fix all of the freight problems we've been seeing, but it is a really important first step that's going to help crack down on some of this.
OOIDA is encouraging truck drivers to go to its website, fightingfortruckers.com, to learn more about the bills and write directly to their lawmakers. Interested in hauling essential supplies into disaster zones under federal contract? Now's the time to register. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has opened up the onboarding process for carriers who want to get involved, but it is a process. Jim Jefferson, Regulatory and Compliance Supervisor for OOIDA's membership department, said he often fields calls from members who see the news after a disaster strikes and want to go right in.
As soon as a disaster hits, the first thing they want to do is they want to jump in and help. Hey, I'm ready to go. What do I need to do? So the process is you have to be registered. You can't wait for a disaster to strike and then think you're going to get a load. You've got to go through the process. There's a step-by-step process that does take time to get registered. And as long as you follow that process, then you're ready to go when a disaster happens. If you wait until the hurricane hits, you're not going to be qualified to get a load at that point.
That 6-step process for the upcoming year has begun. Certain requirements to apply and expect a lot of paperwork. It is a drawn-out process, but if you're accepted, Charles Sperry of the OOIDA Foundation says there are some definite benefits, a steady revenue stream, for example.
And the rates for these kinds of loads do tend to be above average because, of course, you're dealing with inclement weather, dangerous situation. It could be there's a lot of potential complications, shall we say. So
Yeah.
the payment is above average because of that.
There is, however, a flip side to that coin.
If your operation isn't set up in a somewhat flexible manner, then that could be a real problem because, you never know when this is going to pop up. And if you have routes that you're just regularly running, like you've got a schedule, you got to kind of keep to it, this may not be for you because, this will completely disrupt your life for that period of time.
Jefferson said that generous compensation may not come as quickly as you'd like either.
You may get down there and be stuck for a while.
Right.
So it depends on your operation and how much time you have available. Are you going to be compensated? Sure. But again, it's the government.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're going to be compensated tomorrow for a load that you run today. It's going to take time for that to process as well. So, if you've got the time and you've got the extra trucks that you can commit to it, it's definitely a good revenue stream.
There are bound to be questions about the process, which is why FEMA is holding a virtual question and answer seminar on Monday, February 10th. For more information, we've got a link at landlinenow.com. And finally, Maryland officials have unveiled designs for a new Francis Scott Key Bridge. The structure collapsed last spring after a container ship slammed into one of the bridge's support columns. The new bridge has features meant to prevent a similar tragedy from happening again. It'll be taller to provide more clearance and feature other protections that make the bridge more resilient if struck. The bridge also features some modern design elements. Demolition of the parts of the bridge that remain will happen over the coming months, then begins the building process. Completion is tentatively scheduled for sometime in 2028. Maryland officials held a news conference on Tuesday to unveil the news. Among those speaking was Armand Patella, Executive Vice President of the Maryland Motor Truck Association, who said the trucking industry has suffered since the bridge collapsed.
For our organization, it was never really a matter of how much a new bridge would cost. We're pleased that it's going to be backed by the federal government, but for us it was really a matter of how much would it cost not to rebuild it. The intermodal group from our association suffered a disproportional impact from this tragedy, but the impacts are felt through today and will be felt until the new bridge is reopened. A study was recently released within the last few weeks by the University of Maryland and Morgan State University that estimates the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge will increase the trucking industry's operating costs by $92.8 million in 2025, and each year thereafter until a new bridge is opened in 2028. That totals almost $450 million of additional expense, and that's if we remain on schedule, so we're holding you to it.
The total cost of the new Key Bridge is estimated at $1.7 billion. That's Lane Line Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. You can write a letter to your elected officials in Congress or look up contact information for lawmakers who represent you on the state and federal level by using the website fightingfortruckers.com. Again, that website is fightingfortruckers.com. Starting Saturday, Marty Ellis and OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker, will be at the TA in Wilcox, Arizona. That's located at exit 340 on Interstate 10. Stop in, say hi to Marty, and join OOIDA for a $10 discount. Next, I'll discuss the latest on tariffs and the nominee for Labor Secretary with OOIDA's Jay Grimes. Ryan Witkowski discusses trends in cybersecurity with Ben Wilkins of the National Motor Freight Traffic Association, and Scott Thompson covers a plan to eliminate income tax in Mississippi with state expert Keith Goebel. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Capital Reman, the leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, has partnered with OOIDA to offer exclusive member benefits. Visit capitalreman.com today to support America's transportation industry and take advantage of your benefits.
Running on ultra-low sulfur diesel? Stay protected this winter with Howe's Diesel Treat and Diesel Lifeline. Steer clear of gel and ice with North America's #1 trusted brand. Find Howe's products nationwide at select retailers, auto parts stores, truck stops, and on Amazon.com.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
This week has been a whirlwind in many ways, but one of the ways that stands out is the back and forth on the issue of tariffs. The battle over the import taxes between the U.S. and Canada, Mexico, and China has become hard to keep up with changes sometimes happening in hours rather than days or weeks. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Rettig, and I'm joined as always by OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, how are you doing?
Doing all right, Mark. Good to be with you.
Well, glad to have you here because you know what's going on, and I think we're all having a little trouble keeping up. Everything seems to have started kind of at the first of this month, which isn't that long ago. But just so we're all on the same page, can you walk us through what has happened on these tariffs since February 1st?
I'll do my best, and I think we're all trying to interpret and kind of keep track and in our best kind of maybe foresee what the impasse could be. But last weekend, President Trump moved to announce tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. A lot of the reasoning for this has to do with drug trade, illegal immigration, kind of in the back and forth. Trump, in meetings with Mexico and Canada, decided to delay the tariffs that were going into effect with the border countries. So we're kind of now in kind of a 1-month waiting period with Mexico and Canada on tariffs and goods from those countries. I think the discussions that took place between the White House and the leadership from those countries, I think, opened up some communication to perhaps try and find some solutions here. We saw some initial response from Wall Street earlier in the week as well that indicated some concern there. I think on Monday morning, the Dow Jones dropped by more than 600 points. And then not too far after that, we saw some deal making going on. And I think there's a lot of issues at play when it comes to, crime, drug policy, trade, and really kind of just, opening up these negotiation lines and creating some leverage between the U.S. and our trading partners here. So a lot's been going on. As of now, the tariffs with Mexico and Canada are on hold. Certainly, we did see a whole lot of negative reaction from those countries in response to the tariffs. So we're kind of in a holding pattern there, still trying to, really unpack what could be the potential fallout here if these were to go into effect. What impacts would that have on the trucking industry? I think from our perspective that, tariffs have the potential to inhibit recovery from the freight recession that we're starting to see, but too early still to make predictions on specific downstream economic effects. So I know the president is keeping negotiations open with not only Canada and Mexico, but China as well. And again, this has been, I don't think, a surprise from anyone that paid attention on the campaign trail. And Mr. Trump, I think, is kind of putting his power to the test early on. They're not wasting any time on the tariffs issue and certainly some others that we've seen across government so far in the first, I guess we're 3 weeks into the new administration. So lots of things happening, lots of things to be aware of. And on the tariff side, mostly in a holding pattern, especially with the Canadian and Mexico proposals.
You mentioned the negotiations and the president delaying those tariffs. And as I understand it, a lot of folks thought when he talked about them, he was maybe using them as a negotiating tool. What did the U.S. get that caused President Trump to delay those?
Yeah, I believe there were some specific concessions related to immigration as well as the crime that Mr. Trump frankly doesn't want to see, come into the U.S., especially the import of fentanyl into the U.S., which is, really cost too many American lives. So I think he was happy to hear what Mexico and Canada came up with to try and push these back. And I think we'll kind of see in 30 days' time if they come through with what they've negotiated, or if President, the White House are going to re-implement the proposed tariffs. So much to be determined here, but I think it kind of has created, some worthwhile discussions, and certainly has got a whole lot of people, waiting to see what happens next.
What are the various organizations in the trucking industry saying about the situation? And I realize their statements were probably made earlier before the latest changes, but they have spoken out on this. What's the kind of general tenor of the comments?
Yeah, I think there's been some concerns, again, as the trucking industry recovers from years-long freight recessions, that these tariffs could inhibit that. I know the American Trucking Association spoke out on that, and they indicated a 25% tariff on Mexico could see the price of a new tractor be increased as much as $35,000, and that's hard to swallow for especially on the small business side, but larger fleets as well. So I think across the board, especially in the freight sector, I think we were happy, to see the delays be announced, and it could be a tough pill to swallow, but at the same time understand that these are tools that the administration can use to accomplish a whole host of objectives.
One other thing on this I wanted to ask you about. There were the 25% proposed tariffs on a host of goods from Canada and Mexico, but then there was a separate one, I think 10%, that was just on oil imports, I believe, out of Canada. And I assume that one is delayed as well?
Yes, all the Canadian ones are being delayed. But yeah, there was a slight difference for Canadian oil and energy products. Canadian energy resources, oil, natural gas, subject to a 10% tariff, lower than that 25% applied to other goods. So as with the delay was across the board. We'll see if this gets picked up again in a month, if there's going to be a discrepancy in those oil and energy products.
Let's move on to another topic here. Next week, a U.S. Senate committee will hold a confirmation hearing for the president's nominee for Secretary of Labor. Jay, who is this and what can you tell us about them?
Yes. So the Department of Labor Secretary nominee is a former congressman from Oregon, Lori Chavez DeRemer. She had lost her campaign for re-election in November, and then I guess about a month later was nominated for Secretary of Labor. A little bit of an interesting selection because she has been more pro-union, especially as a Republican member of Congress. And perhaps that's what was an incentive to nominate her, given her track record of supporting some pro-union legislation during her time in the House of Representatives. So she's been starting to meet with senators on the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. That committee is going to hold her hearing on Wednesday, February 12th. There certainly has been some debate and discussion over on the Senate side about her confirmation chances. We've heard, I think most notably, Senator Rand Paul has been the most outspoken opposing her nomination. But kind of reading the tea leaves a little bit, it does seem like she is going to get enough votes to be confirmed. Of course, a lot can happen over the next couple of weeks here. But is going to be interesting to see what she has to say when she appears before the Senate. I think one of the most notable positions is that she was one of only a couple of Republican congressional members to support what's called the PRO Act, which would really, we've opposed that legislation as it would kind of federally implement the ABC employment test and have some exceptions there. But I think she's kind of stepped back a little bit of that in her introductory meetings. And according to some of the reports you read, gotten support from both the Democrats on the committee as well as Republicans who not only, I think, welcome her nomination, but also want to support the president's pick for Secretary of Labor. So this is going to be an interesting confirmation hearing to watch next week. I think the Senate, we saw DOT, Sean Duffy get confirmed last week, as well as EPA. The Senate has continued with their confirmation processes for other departments this week. And that'll continue with the Department of Labor hearing for Ms. Chavez-DeRemer on Wednesday, February 12th.
Now, I know that the Department of Labor is not one we talk often about, but it can have an effect on trucking. Are there any particular trucking-related issues beyond not doing the ABC test that OOIDA would like to see her take up if she's confirmed?
Well, there's a couple things. Just in general, the classification and when it comes to trucking, the misclassification of workers. And certainly we want to protect individuals who want to pursue being an independent contractor and make sure that they're protected to do that. Obviously, over the last few years, there have been a whole lot of attempts to take those rights away, including AB 5 in California. So that's going to be something that we're watching for. I know the Department of Labor under Trump's first term and under President Biden had, somewhat different perspectives on an independent contractor classification rule. So might want to, hear some details if that's going to be a priority under her leadership. Another, major issue is the motor carrier exemption under the Fair Labor Standards Act. And this is more of a legislative item, but I think support from the Department of Labor in overturning that exemption to ensure that employee truck drivers can get paid for overtime in a fair manner, would be a great win for drivers, even if they're independent contractors as well. That would be huge to get done. And then certainly, predatory truck leasing and the ways that motor carriers take advantage of workers through leasing contracts. Want to ensure protections building on that truck leasing task force that was just released a couple weeks ago.
Interesting stuff. And I know we don't have a lot of time left, just seconds here, Jay. I know that they've got some nominees for some positions at various agencies within DOT. Do we have any idea on FMCSA yet?
Not in terms of the administrator pick. We have seen this week nominees for the Federal Transit Administration as well as the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Agency. So they are making progress there. And we did see some lower level political appointees over at FMCSA, including a senior advisor position as well as a new chief counsel.
Okay. Well, Jay, thank you very much for the information. We sure appreciate it.
Thank you.
I've been talking with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. We'll be back in just a moment. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
At TruckStop, we've built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on TruckStop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Landline Now, welcome back. Cybersecurity is a concern in nearly every profession, especially in trucking. Landline Magazine's Ryan Wachowski recently spoke with an expert in the field. He joins us with that interview.
Well, joining us today is Ben Wilkins. He is a cybersecurity principal engineer with the National Motor Freight Traffic Association, and NMFTA recently releasing their 2025 Trucking Cybersecurity Trends Report. Ben's joining us today to kind of weed through some of that and figure out what all of that means. And Ben, thanks so much for the time today. And I guess I'll just start first and foremost. A cybersecurity principal engineer. Tell me what the heck that is and what you do at NMFTA.
Yes, it's a bit of a mouthful. Really, it means I get to kind of get into the weeds of cybersecurity research, best practices, kind of the emerging threat landscape, and then look for ways that either impacts or can be applied in the trucking industry. So really the core mission here at NMFTA is to take the research that we're doing and the existing best practices that are out there and develop some education and some resources specific to the trucking industry and really make it relatable.
I guess as we dive kind of into that cybersecurity trends report that the National Motor Freight Traffic Association just recently put out, one of the first things that trend report mentions is something that quite honestly isn't something new. It's phishing. And that report says that 2025 will see significant increases in the efficiency and accuracy of those attempts, according to NMFTA. Why is that the case, and what can carriers do to kind of safeguard against it?
So yeah, that's you're not wrong. Phishing has been around since email, right? It's not a new thing. What has changed though is the emergence and the ease of availability of these large language model generative AI. We joke that the phishing emails used to have bad grammar, poor spelling. It'd be about some long lost royalty in a foreign country is reaching out because they need you to send them $1,000 in Amazon gift cards and they'll give you $5 million for helping them, right? I mean, it was so obvious. Those tells are gone. What we're seeing is these tools allow, they can be from, foreign language native speaker, no knowledge of trucking or transportation or rudimentary knowledge at best, can craft a grammatically correct, perfectly worded, believable email that's relevant to somebody in the transportation industry, uses the right slang. They know about, the terms for, they're talking about reefer loads and they're talking about, cross docks and things like that a normal threat actor wouldn't have thought of, right? And they're even able to match the tone and the sentiment of publicly known officials in a company, right? So they may take the recordings or transcripts of talks that a CEO or a CTO has given from a trucking company, and they'll word an email as though it's believably written as though it's that person, right? So then it's sent to all the people in that company from their CTO or their CFO asking them to do something. And the odds of that being successful are so much higher than the traditional, click here to watch a funny cat video kind of, Hail Mary pass that we used to see. So that's really why we're going to see a continued increase in the next year. These campaigns are getting a lot more sophisticated.
I guess that's something that I hadn't really considered. And we talk about, trucking kind of being very, very ingrained in their ways that, when you hear that lingo, when you hear somebody doing the trucker speak, you're more apt to believe it to be a real thing.
Absolutely. If I tell you that, you've got an invoice that's past due and, we're not going to load your truck again until it gets paid, you're going to respond very differently than if I ask you for $500 in Apple gift cards, right? Like, I mean, it's just, the red flag doesn't go up as quickly, right? There's also, we mentioned in the report, there's this thing, we call it delayed phishing. That can be a little bit kind of muddy to try and understand what that means. But that's another thing that's not brand new, but we're seeing it a lot more where because email security is getting better, right? The filters are getting better, more of the spam is getting blocked. What we're seeing is these malicious emails are crafted in a way where the links are actually clean when it's sent to your email. The email security filters will actually navigate out to those links. It's called detonating, but they go out to the link, they check the link, and if it looks malicious, they block the email. Well, these links aren't malicious when they're checked. It's after they've first been checked that the malicious payload is then added to that link. So it's already passed your filter, it lands in your inbox, and then it is malicious when you click on it. So that's just something that it's a little bit of a, we're playing the whack-a-mole game still with how to approach those, but, really teaching people to be extremely careful around what they click on in their emails.
Well, I think certainly it's obviously that cat and mouse game where, the bad actors seem to get better with the new technologies faster than the legitimate actors are. And then you play that catch-up game. And then as soon as you get hip to the scheme and figure out a way to beat that, well, then they're right back over on top of you. So it's a back and forth that you definitely have to track. And I did want to talk a little bit about that here in a second. But one of the things we talk about as we're discussing the cybersecurity trucking trends report with Ben Wilkins of NMFTA, something that goes hand in hand with those phishing schemes is cyber-enabled strategic cargo theft. And I cover 100%. Cargo theft for Landline. Both CargoNet and Overhaul in 2023 reported record numbers of cargo theft that year. Recent reports now from Cargo Theft show those numbers were once again surpassed in 2024. And the consensus seems to be that it's a trend that's going to continue into 2025. And obviously, strategic cargo theft is now starting to play a much bigger role in that. First and foremost, from your end, what is driving the increase in that specific kind of cargo theft?
So I think it's twofold. I think that there's an obvious situation where these criminal organizations have realized there's a bit of an Achilles heel in our industry, right? They've figured out effective ways to steal freight. And it doesn't have to be backing your truck up to the load of TVs and, fill in the back of your truck. It's rerouting the shipment to a warehouse where they can get cross-docked and resold, and it appears legitimate. You might even use a legitimate carrier to do it, right? So they've figured out some tactics that they're having success with. But I think also it's, again, some of those same tools that are being used for, ransomware as a service attacks or traditional cybercrime are really effective to facilitate cargo theft as well, stealing credentials, getting access to your account on the load board, spinning up a fake load board and getting traffic directed there from phishing campaigns. Those types of techniques are, again, we see the speed and the sophistication of these attacks being boosted by some of the newer technology, the newer tools. It's easier and the bar of entry is lower for a criminal to set up one of these schemes. And we haven't built in the guardrails yet in our identity vetting and our verification checks in the broker-carrier relationship and that process in a way where we have any uniform controls over, are you the driver you say you are, right? You sound legitimate on the phone, but then you turn around and pretend you're a broker on the next phone call and you're double brokering or something like that, right? So there's two pieces to that equation. I think it's they're having a high rate of success, so they're making a lot of money, and the tools are easier for them to use and more accessible. So it's a tough situation.
I think you kind of hit on it too, as we haven't really built in those safeguards yet, and now the legitimate carriers are playing this catch-up game of trying to figure out how to get in front of these, because you're right, it's getting to a point where it looks so legitimate, and the ease of having the strategic cargo theft, it's so easy for some of these criminals to pull off that you can do everything in your power and you can still wind up being a victim. I guess, not just totally calling it a lost cause, but, at this point, are there certain best practices that owner-operators and small carriers can do to protect themselves from some of that strategic theft?
Absolutely. And a little shameless self-plug for NMFTA here, too, because you gave me a great opening for it. We've actually just released some guidance on this specifically. So cybersecurity best practices geared at the small carriers came out in January, also applicable to an owner-operator. But we're releasing in February a specific set of what we're calling the core controls, right? So it's sort of a really condensed checklist of the high value, low cost things that you as an owner operator can do to do this exact thing that you're talking about here. Protect yourself against not just cargo theft, but cybercrime, identity fraud, credit fraud. They're all part of that same attack style, or if you will. So as far as some practical things, it really comes down to know who you're dealing with. Know how long has that broker been around? What does their online footprint look like? Do you have a reason to suspect that maybe this is somebody that's, a brand new broker, doesn't have a big footprint, or have you looked up online? Are there negative reviews about not getting paid or scams that they've done? So that's an easy first step, to just do a little bit of research on that. And also things to be aware of. A last minute change in destination is a huge red flag. I know it happens, for legitimate reasons. Shipments get rerouted in transit and all that, but that should get your spidey sense tingling, if you will. It's one of those things that's often done where the shipment is a legitimate shipment, but it gets rerouted to an illegitimate facility. And that's where the actual theft is going to occur. You're going to deliver that load in good faith, but you're actually delivering it right to the threat actor, right? The criminal. And then that's when, whoever owns the load, who was waiting for it on the other end, isn't going to receive it. Claim gets filed, and it makes you look like you were complicit in this whole scheme, potentially. So that's, really being aware of the techniques that are being used to do this is step number one, and vetting your business partners carefully.
A lot of great information for anyone in the industry to digest and consider. And, one of the things we had talked about was AI and the implementation by AI and some of that back and forth between the bad actors and the legitimate ones. And obviously, it's increasing and impacting nearly every aspect of our life. Also true in the cybersecurity world, even more so. But it does seem to be kind of that constantly evolving landscape. They get better on their end, then the detection gets better, then they figure out how to beat those systems. What does that look like in 2025 in your estimation? Will it be the good guys or the bad guys winning that AI fight?
I like to think we're starting to get up on the lead lap a little bit, because when these large language models kind of dropped, when ChatGPT came on the scene, there was kind of a like, okay, the playing field has changed. What do we do now? How do we protect against this? We didn't even know what kinds of threats we were going to be protecting against necessarily. We've seen throughout 2024, we saw a lot of AI involvement in both cybercrime and phishing to facilitate cargo theft and all of that. And I think that the detection side is getting better. We're learning how to leverage those same kinds of pattern detection and sentiment analysis and all these types of different tools that AI allows us to do. We're leveraging those in our security solutions in a more effective way. And we're starting to kind of also adjust the training we're giving to our employees on what to look for. The scams have changed. The scams aren't as obvious. So our education needs to get a little bit more nuanced, but I think we're seeing that trend start. And I would like to be confident that in this next year, we're going to see the defensive side gain a little bit more of that upper hand. Not to say we're going to solve it and the threat from AI is going to go away. That would be a fairly brash statement, but I think we're figuring out how to use it for the defense pretty effectively.
That was Landline Magazine's Ryan Wachowski speaking with Ben Wilkins with the National Motor Freight Traffic Association. For more information on the upcoming webinar on practical cybersecurity for owner-operators, you can visit nmfta.org and click on the Events tab. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back to Landline Now. Time now for our weekly state legislative update, which takes us to Mississippi and Pennsylvania today. And joining us per usual is our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel, state legislative editor of Landline Magazine. Keith, how are we doing?
Scott, doing all right. How's it going?
Doing just fine here. We don't talk a lot about Mississippi usually, Keith. But
That's your fault.
That is my fault. I'll take the blame. We are going to today, though. We'll make up for lost time here. State lawmakers there are looking at a plan that would, move money around, and in doing so would boost transportation funding in the process. Exactly what is being considered here, Keith?
Yeah, looking at taxes, significant tax plan, significant enough that they devoted 107 pages in this House bill to redoing, eliminating, adding taxes. Obviously, our interest is that transportation plays a prominent role, again, in this lengthy, massive tax bill there, which really got through the House, got through the committee process, and went to the chamber floor and won approval largely with much support in what they're wanting to accomplish. Which, getting into more specifics of it, is they're looking to trim about $2.2 billion from state income tax collection by phasing out income tax collections over the course of the next decade, gradually doing it. That's a notable hit to the state's revenue doing that. So really what getting into the nitty gritty of the legislation is, okay, so what are we going to do to compensate for that lost revenue? And transportation, fortunately, wouldn't have to result in losing money for transportation. Transportation would actually be gaining money
as part of that plan. But as you said there, income taxes would be kind of phased down and reduced over, I think, the next decade or so. Part of it, though, again, when you're talking about doing that, you've got to get the money from somewhere. And I know that a fuel tax increase is sort of part of this plan, right?
Yeah. Well, with the focus on the income tax, the sales tax collections, how they are there in the state, that would also change. As it is now, Mississippi collects 7% sales tax, and that revenue is split between the state and municipalities. What this legislation would do is it would end those, diversions to the local governments, the municipalities. The full sales tax collected would be it would all be going to the state budget. So the state would be getting additional money by that sales tax, no longer being diverted, a portion to municipalities. In its place of the sales tax, municipalities and counties could add a general local sales tax. Both municipalities and counties, they could do that. For counties, their portion of this local sales tax would be devoted to transportation work. The expectation is that could be about $80 million a year, in local tax revenue that they currently don't have now, but they would be able to accumulate again with this local sales tax.
And again, with more money going toward transportation in the state, this thing seems to be gaining support. I believe, as you just told me before we turned the mics on here, that it has passed the House. It's on to the Senate now, so it seems to be gaining support here.
Yeah, I wish it was that simple, Scott. It's going over to the Senate side.
Sure.
By and large, a governor there, he has been supportive of eliminating the income tax.
Okay.
For the past, since he's been in office there. So essentially, it is up to the legislature. How do we want to go about accomplishing that? And here is the House's proposal to do that. Worth also mentioning, we talked about a sales tax at the local level that would be applied for transportation purposes, that revenue going for transportation. They would also add a 5% state tax on sales tax, on both gas and diesel purchases. Right. So in essence, adding that sales tax in addition to the excise tax that they already have, adding that sales tax, it would amount to about an extra 13 cents a gallon for fuel. So quite a bit more money coming in, again, for transportation-related purposes by increasing the tax there at the pump with the addition of a sales tax, which they don't currently have. But anyway, going back to, the bill has been approved by the House. It's moving on to the Senate. The Senate is expected to have their own version that would eliminate the income tax, but how else would they, massage the loss of revenue? We'll have to see how that plays out. But in the end, hopefully it'll be similar to the House proposal, which amount to some additional transportation revenue.
You will keep an eye on that, we know, and you'll keep us updated as new developments arise there. I want to move on to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania before we close things out here. There's a plan there. It's formed that would apparently provide incentives for the purchase of zero direct emission trucks, Keith.
Yeah, this was something, and we may have talked about it late last year. Pennsylvania, they were concluding their 2-year session in I think it was end of November, really, was whenever they closed it up. But like in the last couple of weeks of the final weeks of that session, you had this Senator Rosemary Brown who introduced this truck grant program, this incentive program for near zero emission trucks. It didn't go anywhere in the amount of time that there was left in the session, so she brought it back nice, in early for the 2025 session. Hopes that it'll, obviously it's not going to go through quickly, but that it will advance. But yeah, the focus here, again, is creating that program, this near zero emission truck incentive program. Of course, the focus being on reducing emissions of large trucks.
Yeah, I guess the question would be, the lack of infrastructure. We've seen this in other states. We've talked to people in other states who have expressed concerns that there is not the infrastructure needed for, these trucks on the road. There's also a question of how they're going to pay for it. I think a federal grant program might be part of this plan in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And, of course, considering the Trump administration and where they stand on this issue, I imagine that might be a little more difficult in the current circumstances. So I guess the question is, how do they pay for it? And that's part of the plan there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's spelled out in the legislation, a requirement there for the state, led by the Department of Transportation and the Department of Environmental Protection, to apply for federal funds so that they can use them, obviously, to focus on reducing pollution via trucks, which has been pointed out even by the Pennsylvania Motor Truck Association there locally, that you've got a lot of small businesses there in the state, trucking operations, that they're going to be hard pressed over time to buy new diesel trucks, let alone electric trucks, which is part of the explanation as to why this is needed. This new program is needed because a new electric truck is going to be 2 to 3 times the cost of a diesel truck, and it's just it's far fetched to believe that all of these small businesses there in the state of Pennsylvania are going to be able to do that without some help. So, wanting the state to use again these federal funds so that they can create program so that it would be able to incentivize purchasing 2010 model year or newer trucks, which they believe this is a step in the right direction if the legislature is to move forward with, again, putting on the DOT and the Department of Environmental Protection to apply for those funds.
Yeah, seems like a plan that might have more than a few obstacles in its way, but as we'll do with the Mississippi funding plan there, we'll keep an eye on this. Keith, we appreciate your time as always. People can go to landline.media for updates on these stories and many more. Keith, we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Our thanks to Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine. Our thanks to you for listening, and our thanks to you for all you do to keep America running. That's our show for today. We're back tomorrow with another. Until then, take care and drive safe.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing.
My kids.
Chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together, we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.